Community.
Faith.
Compassion.
Helping people find their way back to God.
Schools will remain closed for the rest of the academic year, but that doesn't mean learning is stopping in Pennsylvania.
What?
Well, this was a critical step for us to take to protect as many people as possible. It was not an easy decision to make. I mean, we all know Pennsylvania's schools are about more than academics. They're sources of hope, inspiration, stability, inclusion. But Pennsylvanians have stepped up in response to this unprecedented situation. Parents and caregivers have turned kitchens into classrooms. School staff and volunteers have packed millions of meals to send home to kids. Educators have come up with new ways to teach students from a distance. So even though schools are closed, many of the important things that schools provide will continue. Teaching and learning will continue. Free meals for kids will continue. Connections will continue. This virus has not stopped. We will get through this.
Well, who's going to teach our kids?
You're it.
You're it, no tag backs.
You're it. No tag back. Double stamp.
You're it, no tag backs, triple stamp.
You can't triple stamp a double stamp.
La, la, la,
You
la,
can't
la,
triple
la,
stamp
la,
a double
la,
stamp,
la, la,
Shelby.
Good morning. My name's Josh Crum. I'm the pastor of outreach here at Project 938, and it's good to see you. I mean, not actually see you. I mean, for one, I'm in Indiana. I'm not even in Westchester yet, so I'm in the process of moving there. But also, it'd be weird if I was in your backyard and jumped out, surprise, good to see you. So it's more like a metaphorical good to see you. But still, it's good to see you. If you've spent this week distancing yourself and quarantining and avoiding your friends and family, then I think you're probably feeling a similar thing that I am. It's good to be together. We were created to be together. We were created to experience relationships with others, but ultimately with the God who knows us and loves us. And so it's really a privilege for us to live life together in this moment right now. Another significant thing about this morning, though, is that I get to wear pants. I don't know if you're anything like me, but sweatpants and a sweatshirt have become my unofficial uniform for quarantine. And so getting to wear a sweater and jeans, it's like I feel more like an adult. So whether you're wearing a sweater and jeans or you're wearing sweatpants, it doesn't matter. We're just glad that you can experience this with us. Whether you're watching on your phone, on your tablet, on your laptop, or on your TV, it's good for us to be together this morning. This past week, we had a men's trivia night and we had a women's happy hour. It was great to see a group of guys and a group of ladies come together to have fun, to share life. That's one of the things that we're missing during this season. And if that sounds good to you, we're going to be doing more of those things in the future because we want to create spaces where we can experience some of the connection that we're missing out on right now. Mark is going to be speaking later on, starting our new series, Jesus Among Us, which looks at the book of John and the way that Jesus interacted with different people and in different situations in different places. And so I'm excited that he gets to kick that off this morning. But before, I'm going to throw it over to Walter. He's going to lead us in worship.
The
They were out of business. They were not going to be producing anything. And this affected distributors, wholesalers, retailers, shareholders, employees. They were not going to be producing anything. Some of you may know the Montgomery County-based company, Hatfield Meat Company. Well, in the late 90s, a bacteria was found in their meat packaging facility, and they had to shut down all of the operations in their entire factory. But there was good news in this for them, because they had been working on a plan to take their factory from sort of 1.0 to 2.0. And when they had to shut everything down, it wasn't a total loss. In fact, they were able to move forward during the shutdown, because when they shut things down, they had to clean every single product. They removed everything and they rebuilt their factory, and they took themselves all the way to 2.0. And so at this point, not just this wasn't a loss for the constituents, this was a gain for everybody, because they took the shutdown and they decided to move forward. I have an idea for us. As we are still shut in our homes and we are in this transition season, we don't know when we're going to be out. We don't know when life is going to resume as normal. What if we took a window of time? What if together we took a window of time and said, hey, let's grow together through this season. Let's focus on a few key things. And if we do these few things right, we will grow, we will thrive, we will see our faith grow in ways we might not expect. I'm going to encourage us at the end of this message to think about a 45-day window between now and the very end of May, maybe beginning of June, the next 7 weeks, and we're going to be doing a series over the next 7 weeks. What if we dial in and focus our own hearts and minds on a few key practices that are going to grow our faith? And I'm going to get back to that in a few minutes. But think about how this has worked in other areas of your life. Some of you have done P90X. I did it for a little while and I learned how to work out, and it improved my life. A focused amount of time on a few key habits could change your life. And I believe that could happen for us. We're starting a series now called Jesus Among Us. We started last week in Easter reflecting how Jesus came along and began walking alongside the disciples in the midst of their questions. Well, we're going to be thinking about Jesus and reflecting on him as he comes alongside of us at the party, as he comes alongside us at church, as he comes alongside us at night at the grocery store, in the courthouse, at the hospital. We're going to look at Jesus among us in all the ordinary areas of life. And we want you to come along with us. And we believe that over the next 6-7 weeks, God can do a significant work in our lives. And when we look back at this pandemic crisis, there's going to be a lot of sadness, and there's going to be a lot of grief, and there's going to be a lot of trouble that we are going to remember. But I'm hopeful that we'll look back and say, man, did I grow in my faith? Did I grow stronger? Did I step forward into becoming the person I've always wanted to be, always knew that God wanted me to be? I'm hopeful that that will happen for us. Hey, just a word a little bit on last week's Easter service. Thank you so much for so many people joining in with us. These last several weeks, we've had more devices tune in every single week than we were even having people attend every single week, which tells me that sort of the footprint of those who call Project 938 home continues to grow. So we're so glad that so many people joined in with us, and we're particularly excited about the 15 people who gave their lives to Jesus. And we're excited for you, and we want to do whatever we can to see you thrive in your faith. We believe that we can be a church where whenever there's a safe, transforming missional environment, lives are going to change. So I want to get us into the series. The series we're doing on Jesus Among Us is going to be out of the Gospel of John. Gospel of John is one of the stories of Jesus' life. John was the disciple. In fact, he was the disciple that lived longer than any of the other disciples. History tells us that 11 of the 12 disciples were martyred for their faith, but John's life ended on the island of Patmos. But before he died, he made sure he told his experience of who Jesus is, and that's helped millions and hundreds of millions of followers of his throughout the years. And so we're going to look at the story of Jesus' life through John's eyes. And so some of you took the challenge last week to begin reading through the Gospel of John, a chapter week. I hope that's going well for you. If you started and you lost traction, you can pick it up. You can pick it up and just go to the next chapter. Or if this is your first week with us, we'd love for you to try this little thing we're doing in the Gospel of John. One chapter a day for 3 weeks, and you'll get through the Gospel of John, and you'll understand Jesus in a way you never have before. So we've been talking through this crisis, that a crisis like this will make you, or it will cement you. We believe over the next 45 days, if we lean into this thing together, as we learn about who Jesus is from this story, God will make us into something special. So let me go ahead and read the first act and miracle of Jesus that John records for us in his gospel. And what we'll do is we're going to reflect on that story a little bit. I have a little special thing I'm going to do right in the middle, and then I'm going to give you that challenge on the back end. So, all right, so starting chapter 2, Gospel of John. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied. "My hour is not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn from the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother and brothers and his disciples. There they stayed for a few days. So Jesus is going to save the wedding. He's going to save the party. In this situation, Jesus' mother was there, and she was part of maybe the hospitality team as a part of this wedding. Weddings in those days would oftentimes last 5, 6, sometimes 7 days. And the bridegroom would be responsible to make sure there was enough food. In particular, there needed to be enough wine for the party. Well, a day, 2, maybe 3 days in, Jesus' mother comes to him and says, "There is no wine here." And this would have been a deeply shameful thing for the bridegroom, because he was responsible to bring the wine. Now, back in those days, alcohol, it could be a problem for people, but there wasn't a binge drinking culture then. But wine was sort of the sign that we were going to be here together. It was a sign of the celebration. And the fact that the wine had run out would mean that the party was over, that the people who may have traveled for days to come be a part of this festival needed to go home. It meant that some of the celebrations and the events that they had planned for the next several days, they were now over. This was a really big deal. Now, this wasn't a big deal like somebody needed to be healed. This wasn't leprosy. This wasn't blindness. This was public embarrassment. But to this bridegroom and to the bride, it was a very significant thing. And Jesus was going to step in and return the life to the party. We're going to be talking about this story, and there's three things I want to draw out of this story that points us to who Jesus is, and points us, I believe, it points us to something way bigger than this wedding. But before we do that, I've got a great story that I want you to hear about a couple who are part of Project 938 who, well, they've lost their wedding in much the same way that maybe this original couple that Jesus helped out in Cana lost their wedding. And I want you to hear how they're thinking about it and how they're learning to trust God with it. Let me take a minute. I'm going to introduce Graham Bowen and Jenna Mengel. Engaged to be married on May 23rd, but they're not getting married on May 23rd now. Things have changed. They've got they are thinking through the heart of what it means to be married and the heart of this whole wedding thing in entirely new ways. And honestly, as I've interacted with them, I've just been inspired by their faith, and I want to give you the opportunity to hear a little bit about it as well. So I'm going to switch over to gallery view, allow you guys to talk. Graham, Jenna, why don't you introduce yourselves to us and tell us a little bit of this story for yourself.
Yeah, well, thanks, Mark. My name is Graham, and this is my fiance, Jenna. And we both work for a campus ministry called Cru in the Westchester area. We work with Westchester University students. And last July, we got engaged, and we are planning to get married on May 23rd of this year.
Yeah, and quickly, throughout the month of May and the beginning of April here, those plans have been uprooted, changed again. And like Mark said, we're planning on May 23rd. And our current prayer is that we would be able to gather our closest family and our bridal party to be married. We are skipping the rehearsal and just getting married on May 22nd, the evening before. And so it's definitely a change. It's been a breadth of emotions, and it's different than what we'd imagined for a long time. But this is where we are today.
Well, a lot of us who have been through a wedding day, and even those of us who might imagine a wedding day, these are things that are like years in the making. We think about these for a long amount of time. This isn't like, all right, hey, look, I was going to go to the gym. Hey, let's get married. You don't think like that. Families dream about these things. We dream about these things in our hearts and our minds. We write large checks to make these things happen. And some of those large checks have been shipped. And people had expectations and hopes and dreams about what this day might be. So this isn't just a Graham and Jenna thing. This is a family-wide thing. And when you start changing these things up, everyone's got different ideas about this. Every wedding, almost every wedding sometimes has too much alcohol and way too much family drama. Even the best families, right? And so I'm not asking you to tell us anything about that. We just know that it's all hard, and these are challenging things, right? As you've kind of had to wrestle through some hopes and dreams, some expectations of what you thought the next couple of months of your life was going to be like, how has God met you in that?
Yeah, Mark, I think first we want to recognize that it has been a season of a lot of disappointment and suffering, but it's still a blessing to get to enter into marriage, that God's still giving us that gift. And we acknowledge that the suffering that we're experiencing, there's other people experiencing much deeper sorrow and pain. Mm-hmm. And so we want to acknowledge that. But in that, it has been grandly disappointing. I think Andy Crouch, I believe, in his article said that we must grieve before we can become creative again. And I think I have grieved this more through tears, anger, sadness, more than any other loss, probably. I've had to face and process that with the Lord. And in this process, we've also seen God provide us with housing, and that was a miracle in itself. And I think in that moment, when we finally found a place to live, with virtual tours and the craziness of that, I began to realize if God can do the impossible in one small thing, then what does he have in store for not only a wedding day, but a marriage that's committed? So I am keeping hope. I'm trying to press into hope, knowing that no matter what, God called us into this, and where he takes it is totally up to him. It always has been, but it's very much apparent right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would love to share that I have experienced God's faithfulness. Every single day I experience a change in the environment around me, in our economy, in my attitude. And through every change, each moment of every day, I've experienced God to remain the same. And it's been an incredible reminder that despite what happens here, he is unchanging, and he works in the realm above this world, and he sees those of us who desire for his plan and to see that come to life in our own lives. And so there are many days where I feel far from him, but he has reminded me over and over again that he is faithful, and he continues to provide for us as we need.
That's really good perspective. Jen, I really like the way you talked about how having to grieve something. And you're right. Yes, there's always going to be somebody who has suffered more. But sometimes if we don't name the loss, or name the hurt, or name the thing that we wanted and hoped for, we can't allow God to comfort us in that. Right. And so I'm glad to hear how he is comforting you and opening your eyes to see how he is creatively making way forward. And Graham, that's good wisdom for a husband, to see how God is faithful to you and strong for you, because it enables you to be strong as a spouse and a husband. And so you guys are off to a great start. Now, think about this. What might this say? What might this mean for your marriage, that you have to trust God with your wedding in such a way as this?
Well, certainly trusting such a monumental time in our lives to God brings a whole new level of reality to putting my trust in God. But I've been seeing and learning that the plans that I make for myself, that we make for ourselves in our wedding, are the plans that only we have thought of, or the ideas of our own minds. But I've seen that as we've had to make adjustments and make changes, that these are plans that are beyond us. I believe God is revealing different plans that have allowed us both to see a hope for something better than what we could have envisioned at first. I can honestly say I don't know what that looks like, and there's still uncertainty involved, but I believe that God has a bigger idea and a bigger plan in mind that will be more beautiful and more glorifying to him than what we could have drawn up on our own accord.
I think I've had to wrestle with the entitlement, or the reality that other people are getting something that I want. And then I remember that that's just not how the Lord works, that he doesn't have a running out of resources, but he has enough for all of us. He has enough to go around. And so when I think about that in our marriage, I think we want to be marked by generosity and giving. And we want to remember this time as a time that whatever day the Lord gives us on May 22nd-ish is a good thing, that we want to have content hearts in every good gift that he pours out on us. And I've been clinging to Psalm 84. It says, "No good thing does he withhold from those who walk uprightly." And so whatever he gives us, be it a changed wedding or whatever else he deals us in this season or allows in this season is his good gift in his timing. And I'm glad to get to process that now with Graham, because I'm sure that we will process it many other times in many other situations throughout our lives together.
I love the way Jenna and Graham have looked at their wedding and see that it is pointing them to something so much bigger and so much greater, their marriage. I'm so grateful for my marriage. Oh, I had a great wedding day, but man, it pales in comparison to the 23 years I've had with Kathleen. And I'm so excited for Jenna and Graham to have each other and have such a great perspective. Well, this story that we read is about a very same thing. There's a wedding that's pointing to something so much greater. In this story, I want to share with you three things: the sign, the wine, and the time. Let's start with the sign. This was the first miraculous sign, as John tells it. As you read through the Gospel of John, you're going to see 7 miracles that have happened. And his hope is that as you read about these miracles, they point you to who Jesus is and that we can believe in him. Well, this particular sign, it was the first of them, and it's pointing to something much, much greater. And let's go back to the story. So Jesus' disciples are invited to the wedding. I hope that's cool to you, that people would want Jesus at his wedding, that he wasn't like the guy who's coming in and throwing and making the party awful. No, he brought the party with him, and he hopefully was, I would expect him to be the life of that party, certainly return the life to this party. Well, you know the situation. They run out of wine, and somehow his mother's a part of the planning, and she comes to him and says, "There's no wine." And he says, "No, it sounds like, woman, why do you involve me?" It's more like, "Dear woman." It was a very gentle way he said, but we'll talk about his timing on this thing. But she points out the servants and tells the servants to do whatever Jesus tells them to do. And he says, "Okay, over there, those 6 stone water jars, they're empty now. You go ahead and fill them with water." So they go off and fill them with water. And then he says, "Take them to the master. After you're done, take it and fill up a glass, bring it to the master of the banquet." Well, now here's the thing. Nobody knows about this. The bridegroom doesn't know about this. The bride doesn't know about this. The servants know about that. I love that about Jesus, this modesty. Well, they fill it up and it's wine. And he brings it to the master of the banquet. The master of the banquet is like, "Whoa, this isn't just wine. This is really good wine." Think about what he did. There was these empty stone jars. Those stone jars, they were used for ceremonial cleansing. It was a traditional thing. It was a traditional religious Jewish thing that whenever they came to someone's house or whenever they came to the temple, there would be a ceremony of washing, a ceremony of cleansing. Maybe you're going through the ceremony of cleansing multiple times a day just to make sure that you are clean enough. Well, what this symbolizes, what this points to, was these ceremonial washing jars. They were empty. Judaism was empty at this point. The Israelites' faith was empty. There's a bunch of rules, but there was no life to the faith at that time. Jesus not only came to fill it, but he came and filled it with something new. These ceremonial jugs, all they could do was give you a ceremony that made you think you were clean. Jesus replaced the ritual of cleansing with wine, with the celebration that all the rules and the ceremonies have been fulfilled by him. All the rules have been fulfilled by who Jesus is. And I want you to go back and understand what these rules were for. The ceremonial washing, there's probably some hygiene going on, and I certainly hope as you're washing your hands and you're doing all things you need to do, there's some real hygiene going on. But part of what was going on is that the Israelites were setting themselves apart. They were saying, hey, every time they cleanse themselves, they say, we're different. We're Israelites. We're different. We are set apart for God, and we're supposed to love God, but we are different. the rules would divide people. And in some ways, that's what all rules divide. They divide people between those who are going to be faithful to the rules and those who aren't going to be faithful to the rules. And for Israel, that was an important part of who they were. And I don't want to say that the rules are wrong. At that time, it was an important part that the ceremonies reminded people that they were for the Lord, that they were supposed to be dedicated to God. But Jesus came and said, now I am with you. The rules have been fulfilled, and now things are so much better. See, the rules at the time were supposed to focus them on who they're supposed to be. But if you lose the why behind the rules, if you lose the why behind the rules, all you have is dividing people between these people and those people. And just like any of the coronavirus, if you forget the why behind the rules, when we forget that, hey, look, we're using social distance to help save lives, what ends up happening is we begin dividing, and it becomes these people want this and these people want this. And when you forget that real lives are at stake, you lose the reason behind it. Just this past week, my family was out in our yard, and another family was walking by, and we were standing together and they were standing together, but we were separate and apart. And a woman came by, and it made her anxious to see us there together. And she pulled up and she said, I don't see you guys 6 feet apart. And we're like, it's because we're related to one another. We're like all together all the time. But she was afraid, and she didn't trust that we were keeping the rules. The two families were far apart. But when you lose the why, when you lose the trust behind it, judgment and divide and contempt and all these other things begin creeping in because, well, it becomes about the rules, and we forget that the rules are for the people. The rules have a reason. And the sign was that Jesus came to fulfill the rules. The people were supposed to set themselves apart for him. Well, now he's there. And now the ceremonial jars that have set themselves apart can be filled with wine, because what they've been setting themselves apart is now fulfilled. He is there among them. Now they can celebrate. He is with them now. And that leads us to the other part of what this pointed to. The sign points us, well, to the reason behind the wine. Why is there a reason for wine? Well, the vision that Jesus has always had is that he is going to bring all people together from every tribe, tongue, language, nation. He's going to bring them all together for a tremendous wedding feast of the Lamb. There's going to be an ultimate celebration where all people come together to celebrate the goodness that can be brought together. The beautiful thing about a wedding is only that couple can bring people together. The hard thing about Jenna and Graham and not them being able to have this big celebration is that they're the only people who can bring all these people together. And now that they can't have the big celebration, well, how will they do that? And they're going to figure it out in their own way. Jesus is the one person who can bring people together from every tribe, tongue, nation, and language. And when he says that there's wine to celebrate, it means that he is recognizing that there's going to be a day when all peoples can come together around love. Not around rules, not about we're the ones who kept the rules, we're the ones who cleaned our hands the best. No. We're the ones who came together around his love. And it kind of brings a unique kind of quirkiness about our faith. See, the Christian faith, in some ways, if you have faith in Jesus, you are in some ways betrothed to Jesus. In fact, the Bible describes the church as the bride of Christ. Not yet the wife of Christ. We are the bride of Christ. And so in some ways, our life is very much that of Jenna and Graham's. We're like engaged people. If you are a Christian, that means you are no longer dating other gods. You're no longer dating other people around which you're going to build your life. No, 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 no. You have committed yourself to Jesus and his love. No more are you going to try other ways of living. You're going to live in his way. And you're going to trust his pattern, and you're going to trust his path. And yes, it's awkward, just like an engaged couple are kind of together, but they don't get to be fully together. They don't get to live together. They get to kind of grow their relationship, but it's not fulfilled. The same thing is true of the Christian life. We get to experience Jesus among us, but we are waiting, and we are looking forward to the day when it'll be a fullness of that reality, when the fullness of the wedding supper of the Lamb happens, and we get to celebrate the fullness of that intimacy, the fullness of everything that we've longed for in that relationship on that wedding day. And that wedding day doesn't happen, and so we live in this in-between life. Much like an engaged couple is practicing and preparing their life to be together, well, that's true of us as well. We're beginning to prepare. We're learning to communicate. We're learning to engage. We're learning to have a relationship with somebody we didn't have a relationship with before. And that points us to the time. Just an interesting part of this story that theologians have reflected on this a ton, because anytime someone's going to tell a story of Jesus' life, there's an awful lot that you can talk about. There's a lot of things you can talk about, but John decides that he's going to bring this one little piece into it. And every good marriage, every good wedding has family drama, and this one is not any different. So what you have here is, I don't know how Mary got on the hospitality team here. You know how these things happen. She gets herself on the hospitality team, and she goes to Jesus and says, Jesus, and she knows something special about him. There's no wine. And Jesus takes this as her trying to basically say, you need to fix this. And he says, dear woman, my time has not yet come. Essentially, he is saying, like, Mary, are you really approaching me like this? Are you going to power up on me to solve this thing? And it's interesting. Mary changes her entire approach. She brought him the problem, and he shifts her perspective. And then she takes a different approach. She just looks at the servant and says, all right, do whatever he tells you to. Some folks say this was a passive-aggressive manipulation of Mary to get Jesus to do what she wanted him to do. I think we all hope that Jesus isn't manipulated by passive-aggressive people, and that's how this world runs. Jesus recognized that he was going to do things in his own way, in his own time. And I think we see Mary change her perspective, and Jesus respond to that in a very honest and modest way. And I think it's a good pattern for us when it comes to prayer. If you think about Jenna and Graham, I remember my own engagement days. I remember what it was like. I was learning to communicate with Kathleen. She was training me to communicate with her. I was helping her understand how to communicate with me. And we were figuring this thing out. And in some ways, we're all doing that with God. We are learning how to communicate. We are learning how to interact. Even Mary in this interaction, she changes her perspective and things start happening. She reorients herself in this new humble posture and things start happening. What if we saw our lives as this reorientation to Jesus' control over all things, his timing to act in all things, and resetting ourselves before him? I want to give us an opportunity to practice his timing and to practice this very thing. I've given us some specific things to do, and I want to remind us of those things. We have a 45-day window here, and I want to encourage you to try these practices on. A few weeks back, I said, hey, one of the ways we overcome fear is not through controlling and making sure everything's safe. One of the primary ways we overcome fear is through love. And so what would it look like for you to each day, instead of reacting in fear, to find one simple, extraordinary way to extend yourself to another person? So I know people are doing that, and I've really enjoyed hearing the stories. I've done that myself with a few people I haven't heard from in a few years, and that's been good for my heart. It's been good for my soul to reconnect with people. Maybe I've let some relationships drift a little. It's been good for me. I hope it has been for you. Last week, as we started talking about this series, Jesus Among Us, I invite us to start thinking about that by reading through the Gospel of John, one chapter a day. I hope that's going well for you. Like I said, if you've dropped off that, you can pick that thing up. If you're looking for a way to do that online, I encourage you to look up the YouVersion app. There's several reading plans for the Gospel of John. I want to add one more opportunity for you to think about. I'm calling it the 3-4-5 challenge. 3-4-5. For the next 45 days, what if you, just like Mary, reset your heart back to God 3 times every day? First thing you do in the morning, maybe you go right to your knees, or start with your hands up, but in a public, in a postured way, turn your heart to God and ask for His grace, ask for His presence in your life, ask for you to have His perspective on what you see. Sometime in the middle of the day, whether it's through your watch or your phone, have something remind you to take a posture one more time and turn your heart to God and remind yourself of who He is. The middle of the day is a good time to take a physical sort of inventory. Are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling excited? Are you feeling fearful? Name those things and lift those things up to God. God, I'm excited about tonight, and I pray for your blessing on it. Or Lord, I'm concerned about the things I'm hearing, and God, I want you to help me carry these things. Lord, I feel anxious, and help me to maybe extend love in the middle of this. And then at night, in some way, maybe raise your hands or go to your knees and give thanks to God for the way He's been with you through this day. 3:45. If you did that 3 times, if we did that 3 times a day for 45 days, we're going to begin practicing the presence of God in our lives. As we read about who He is, and as we look for ways to overcome fear with love, we're going to begin practicing a way of life. Practicing a way of life that we can live into and see God transform, step in, and we can grow in our faith. I would love it if we were able to look back on this particular stay-at-home thing and all the weirdness around it and saw that not only did God work in our lives, not only did we grow in our faith, but as we grew in our faith, He opened up doors and opportunities for us to show His love and care. Why? Because we're paying attention to what He was doing. We're paying attention to what He was saying to us. And we found opportunities to be His hands and feet, to be His servants, because we were paying attention. Let me pray. Jesus, I thank You for the way You showed love and care to this family whose wedding party had gone dry. You returned the life to that party. And God, I know for a lot of us, staying at home has gone dry. Would You restore our life? Would You restore our joy? Would we see You, the fulfillment of all the things we long for? Would You give us hope of the ultimate fulfillment of those things? And God, as what we've seen in Mary's life, as she reset herself to You, God, would You pour out all Your goodness to us as we set ourselves aside, as we remind ourselves of the forgiveness we have in the cross, as we remind ourselves of all the goodness that You have shown us, as we open our hands to You. Would you strengthen us for our days ahead? And God, over the next 45 days, would you do a work in our lives that would leave us different than where we started? When we look back on this moment, would we, and the season of our life, would we be grateful for the way we grew in our faith and the way we became more like Jesus? In his name we pray. Amen. Signing off from Westchester.
Peace, bring it all to peace. The storm surrounding me, let it break at your name still. Call the sea to still, the rage in me to still every wave at your name. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Breathe, call these bones to live, and call these lungs to sing once again. And I will praise Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name shall not be overcome. Your name is alive, forever lifted high. Your name shall not be overcome. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus.
Like Mark mentioned in his message, relationships are important. And Jesus shows us how to engage in those relationships and the value of those relationships. Community is a valuable and important thing. And we value it as a church. And we want to let you know that we have a number of different small groups that are taking part right now. And we would love to help you get connected with one of them. We believe that those things are important, not just from a spiritual perspective, but also just for life. A chance to have a group of people that we live with, that we celebrate with, that we mourn with, a group of people that we can dive into life with. If you're interested in that, please feel free to let Rachel know. You can email her at rachel@project938.net. She would love to get you connected. I'm serious. You would make her week if you asked her to get you connected into a group. If you're interested in finding out more about our church, about taking the next step, about meeting our team and figuring out what does it mean to be part of this thing, we want to invite you to be part of our Next Steps class. That's happening right now, like directly after the service. Like as soon as this thing is done, you can join by clicking on the Zoom link that will show up in the online chat. Now, lastly, if you're prepared to give, we would love to invite you to continue to give online at 938give.net. We appreciate your willingness to sacrifice, not for our sake or for the sake of our church, but to give back to God what he has first generously given to us. Folks, it's been so good to be with you. It is good for us to be together, and I am so glad we could be this morning. If you have any questions about 938 or about how to be connected here, please don't hesitate to let us know. You can go to our website, project938.net, or you can follow us on social media, give us a call, email us. We will do anything we can do to help you feel connected here. Thank you so much for being with us. We look forward to seeing you next week.